Hello and welcome to this Air Traffic Technology Roundtable, ATM Beyond 2021, Operations and Innovation. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss some of the important technology-related issues we think will affect the air traffic management sector over the coming years. First of all, I'd like to briefly introduce you to our panel of experts. We're lucky to have with us today Stephen Bradford, Chief Scientific and Technical Advisor on the Next Gen programme from the FAA, here to give us a perspective from the USA. Amongst many things, he is chairman of NextGen's Technical Review Board, and he has a leading role in NextGen's international engagement activities. Stephen, can you give us a bit more background on your role and how you work with your international partners?
Sure. I'm a member of the ICAO Global Air Navigation Plan, which is all about innovation and how we should move forward. I'm actually the chair of the Global Air Navigation Plan Study Group. I've also worked on the ATM Beyond, and I have a leading role in our coordination with Cesar joint undertaking on the future of aviation.
Great, thanks, Steve. We also have with us today Cristiano Cantini. Cristiano is Head of Planning and Innovation with ENAV. He's worked for ENAV for more than 15 years, starting off his career as an engineer, and was appointed Head of Planning and Deployment in 2016 at ENAV. Cristiano, hello.
Good to see you, Ben.
Good to see you. Can you just tell myself and the audience a little bit about ENAV and the planning department and what exactly it is you do?
Yeah. ENAV is the Italian navigation service provider, and within ENAV, I'm responsible for the Planning and Innovation Department within the Technical Directorate. Within the Planning and Innovation Department, we take care of the whole chain of the research and the innovation together with the investment planning activity. And in this regard, we do that together with our ANSP colleagues. I'm a member within the strategy board of the A6 Alliance, and we do that in international fora. I'm administrative board member within the Cesar joint undertaking, and we take care, of course, of the international activities within the Eurocontrol agency, as well as activities within the whole Cesar chain.
Great, thanks, Cristiano. Cheers. And last but not least, in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, at least in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, is Wolfgang Brettel, who is Director of Operations at Munich for DFS. Wolfgang started off his career at DFS as a controller, and then worked as a teacher, training staff at his academy. Went on to work as a supervisor, an operations manager, before taking over responsibility for all of the air traffic operations at Munich at the beginning of this year. Hello, Wolfgang.
Hi, Ben. And hi.
Great, good. Thanks for joining us. Can you just tell us what's happening at Munich at the moment? You've been in the position since January, haven't you? I mean, what's keeping you busy or not busy at the moment?
Yeah. First of all, I'm in this position as the director since 1st of January. Before that, I was 7 years already here in Munich. By the 1st of January, we put together the ACC part and the tower part. So I'm now responsible for every ATC operation here in Munich. So that's the reason for being from 1st of January. Before, I was here already for 7 years, being responsible for the ACC. And the biggest challenge we currently have is, first of all, to get together the tower and the ACC, which is interesting because you have many people who are a long-time tower people and now and center people, and now they have to come together. And from a technical point of view, we have as well a very, very interesting project coming along. It's the Icast System. It's our new ATS system for the ACCs, for all ACCs in Germany. And we in Munich will be the first one in the lower airspace to take this Icast system into operations, and this is planned for the 3rd to 4th of September in 2022. So 16 months from now, we will implement this big system, and that will be a very big change in our whole infrastructure here. And I'm really looking forward to it because our discussion today is going into that direction, and well, I think there is something we can do about that.
Great, yeah, sounds really interesting. I look forward to hearing more about it. So I'd just like to take this opportunity now to thank our sponsors that have helped make this event possible. Those sponsors are ENAV, MITA, and Transoft Solutions. You can see on the right-hand side of your screen a tab which says handouts. There is some literature to download from all of those companies there. I'd encourage you all to look at them. And also, I'm just going to give a little plug to our LinkedIn page at this juncture. If you enjoy today's session and you'd like to be kept up to date with future events and about our magazine, which is published during the summer, then please do look us up on LinkedIn and follow our page. Anyway, back to business. I'll just explain a little bit about the format of today. We're going to have a discussion amongst the panelists for about 20-25 minutes about a number of topics around operations and innovation in ATM, about some of the technologies that we think are going to be impacting and changing things, about the context of we're in the context of COVID now and bouncing back from COVID. That's after that 25 to 30 minutes, we'll go into the open Q&A session. I'd encourage you to submit any questions that you have for our panelists whenever they occur to you via the tab on the right-hand side of the screen. What does happen sometimes is everyone waits until the 30-minute Q&A session starts. So the sooner you submit your question, the more likely it is to be answered. So that'd be great if you could do that. The questions won't appear straight away. I will publish them when they're asked to the panelists in the second half. So as long as that's all clear with everyone, we'll start the main session. And Wolfgang has very kindly agreed to ask the first one, which, considering he's very directly engaged at the sort of operations side of things, and it is about COVID. And we'd just like to know, Wolfgang, if you could talk about how COVID's changed the way that you work at Munich, in the last year or so. How has it affected the way controllers work and the way your operations are running there?
Yeah, well, of course, what we saw was in the year 2019, when we had that much traffic here in Europe, a sudden decrease to 2020 when all that started. From one day to another, no traffic. That was a really interesting experience, but it wasn't like that. It was not on a single day. It was a couple of days which it took to come down to the lower levels. And in this phase, that was interesting and sometimes hard to manage, because we had in that phase, we were uncertain what is going on, what is this illness about, what is this whole COVID thing. And we had at the very first phase some controllers who already were infected, so that was as well hard to handle. But then when the traffic was down, it was important to mention here that we managed a lot of things to be done remotely rather than before privately, like we do this today. When normally we have a session like that in Madrid, for example, or in the Washington annual, something like that, and nowadays we have it virtually, and we manage that, and especially without jeopardizing the safety. So that was something very important. I would like to take two examples out of the business which are now changed operationally. We can take much more care for the individual flight. That is something which is now easier because we do not have so many individual flights, and we can look for them in terms of optimum climb profiles, optimum descent profiles, optimum vertical lateral profiles. So that is something which we are now much more used to than before, and I think that is something we will keep on after the traffic will come back or the traffic is rising again, because we now have a better understanding between controllers and the pilots, of course, to ask for that and to remind them that. Technically, we have something which is interesting. It's only a minor thing, but it's a very important thing to me. You may know that an ATS system must be adapted from time to time with new data, with new lines, with new fixes, all these things. And normally that must be done on the machine directly. And now we found a way to do that from at home. And this gives us an opportunity to not only do it from at home, which would help if somebody's infected, but as well to do it maybe for another ACC from Munich, or other ACCs can do it for us, do this adaptation work from abroad, and that is something which is very important, which is very helpful, and which of course will stay.
Great, thanks, Wolfgang. That's really interesting to hear that you've embraced this remote working in that way, and also that that focus now on looking after the individual flights. I mean, I think that's something that come up in our kind of pre-talk, didn't it? Stephen, you mentioned that as well. Can you give us a, I mean, I know it's quite a big question, but how has it impacted the way that you guys are working in the US, and have you found the same thing?
Yeah, well, first of all, we learned to not be so flexible in the schedules. We actually had to schedule cohorts together, so in case one person was infected, we still were able to bring in other people. So you had a continual set of controllers because you have to take out a group and quarantine them. We also learned to clean really well. When we had infected it the first time, we might be ATC 0. No operations for a whole day, and now we've gotten it down to a couple of hours. That's important. But the other thing is we have realized that when you have fewer flights, any saving you can make in an individual flight is really, really important to the user. While we used to focus on high volume turnaround, we also found that giving them that procedure, giving them that extra edge. We have a tool, we have a surface management tool in Charlotte that we were only using for the large banks of aircraft, big hubbing operations. We're actually using it all the time now because the airlines want to use it and the controllers want to use it, because managing every flight is very important to the bottom line. So the aggregate benefits aren't as large, but it really does hold a lot. And so, yeah, that's been very important. The other thing, just like everyone else, we've learned to do a lot of things remotely that we didn't do remotely. One of those things we can't do, though, is installations, unless it's for something that's very safety critical. We don't let our technicians go on for a lot of our new automation and our new tools. And so we're getting a little bit behind on that because you can't install remotely. But yeah, we're learning to focus on the individual flights. We're learning to get resilient through scheduling, and we're also looking at other ways of becoming more resilient.
So what does that focus on individual flights really enable you to do, Stephen? I mean, what kind of benefits can you realize?
Well, I mean, this is back to, if you can provide them the PBM procedure, the profile descent, the profile departure, if you can manage them in the gate until they can roll out to the runway and take off, you can save minutes of fuel burn, and that's really the efficiencies, and every minute saves fuel, and every saving of fuel is bottom line, because fuel is one of the major costs now. Having been around as long as I have, in 2003, 2004, it was all about schedule and fuel. Who cared? It was the lowest cost, and we have queues of 38 to 40 aircraft at our major airports. Fuel becomes your major cost, and queues of 3 or 4 or 5 to keep pressure on the runways is important, and the rest of them not burning fuel is very, very important. So it's really that individual savings of fuel on every flight is really key to the bottom line for our airlines.
Is that something you're finding as well, Wolfgang? Is that those kind of environmental gains from this period?
Yeah, of course, and that is something. Of course, before COVID, we tried to do that as well. But in times of much traffic, you cannot so much focus on that. And of course, in terms of fuel saving, there is a lot to be done. And but what I think is it's really changing a little bit the mind of the pilots and the controllers, both sides, to look much more on that point. And that is something I really think we can take out of the crisis thereafter, that they are now more used to do that. And that can help us when we discuss, because especially in Europe, we will have a politicians scenario that will lead us to much more green ATC than before, and then this becomes vital for us.
Okay, right. Okay, there's just 2 other real things that I wanted to discuss around COVID, and one of them was to do with resiliency. It was a word that often got used, perhaps more so at the beginning of the pandemic, but I mean, do you think the sector has now proved its resiliency, or are there other things that need to happen now? Do you want to talk around that a little bit, Wolfgang, first?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I must say the ATC from the operational point of view was resilient, or is still resilient. We kept the sky open. We never had any day or one day where we completely lost because of, for example, having no air traffic controllers. It was a really interesting discussion as well with our unions to come to a conclusion to find a way to have enough people here for the piece of traffic we have, but get a chance to get the others out of the ops room before they, for example, can be infected. And luckily, I can say for Munich or for whole DFS, we never had any infection in the ops room. So our measures here were quite good, and we didn't have a problem in that. So the operational resilience is there. Financially, for example, or on the other side, we are not resilient. No company, no airline, no ANSP, nobody in this industry is resilient to such a financial problem. And here we of course have to that is something we have to face. And the interesting word for the future is scalability. And so how can we? But nobody will be able to scale for such a crisis. Hey, we had at the very beginning, we had some 10% left of traffic. In Munich, normally we had in summer 1,200 to 1,400 flights, and we went down to some 80 or 70 flights. Nobody's scalable for that. But of course, what we can take out of this is because what Stephen just has said, we have different things we look on in the different times. Sometimes it's too much traffic, then we have a capacity thing. Sometimes it's the money, then we have to take care for that. And being more scalable or being more flexible, that would really help us to breathe in the future better, and then to react to such situations.
So that scalability problem is really twofold, I guess. There's a kind of structural management aspect, operational aspect to it, but there's also a technology aspect to it, I would imagine. Would you see it in those terms, Stephen? I mean, is that
sure? Yeah, I think the scalability. I think one thing we learned is that we've always worried about our infrastructure as being our point of resiliency. It turns out this is our workforce this time. So, you know, how do you make sure that you keep the workforce up? And we did have occasions where we had to shut a center for a few hours to bring in a new crew and clean up. But you know, we also look to, could I offload traffic from one facility to another? And then you go, well, what does it take for a controller to take over that traffic? And then you realize, well, maybe a little machine learning algorithms, a little bit of simulation. Maybe I can take a controller and show them what this piece of airspace is like, so they can perform. Now, they probably can't perform 100% because it's new airspace to them, but they get to the 80–85%. So we can try to make our workforce more resilient with tools. I think the other thing we learned is we love to have our own servers in every facility, and if it's not a safety critical function and capability, it might be better to have that in the cloud, where you can get other sorts of resiliency, because then you don't have to get your technicians into the facility to swap out racks and to do that maintenance. Processing as a service, storage as a service, using the cloud more is something we're really going to look at, because a lot of our traffic flow tools don't really require a local presence. They really are beyond a single facility. And so we're starting to look at that as part of our evolution of our automation, is to get away from that. I only feel comfortable if I have everything on my own servers in my own facility. So it's a mindset change for both our program managers, our controllers, and our technicians. How do you do maintenance in the cloud and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, you were talking a little bit about that in your introduction, weren't you, Wolfgang? This the idea of digitalization and remote working. Is that something that you're going to be introducing technically to enable scalability and flexibility in your operations more?
Yeah, of course we try to. Well, if you look to the pure operation, what an air traffic controller is doing, of course, a tower controller or an ACC or approach controller, of course, they're sitting in front of their radar screen or their tower windows and do their work. But beside the operation, of course, there is as well a lot to do. Like I said, the adaptation of the system, for example, and why can't we do that from abroad? Why can't we do that from somewhere else? As well, the way we work as a management, it has changed tremendously. We do not fly to any location. We just stay at home. We take our video conference systems and do our work there, which is from my perspective, sometimes a bit more boring. Sometimes you miss the opportunity to get to take a beer with somebody in the evening. But of course, it's efficient. It's efficient. You can do it in an efficient way. And for project work, for example, with that Icast system I mentioned before, we had to face a problem that we planned for some on-site tests, which were not possible because the people who are doing this system for us, they're coming from Spain, they were not allowed to fly to here. And so was the question: shall we stop the project? Can we continue the project because we cannot see what they have programmed? We cannot see if the software releases are working or not. And then we found ways to. At the first glance, it was easy ways how to with a camera to see what the other is doing. But then we found ways to do that better. And finally, we had this on-site checks off-site, and that was very interesting. And it worked. There is, of course, something missing, and you don't get everything. You cannot touch everything, but there is no other way. The only chance would have been to say, okay, we stop it, but that was no opportunity. We are investing so many resources into that project. We want to have this project now, and so it was. And then we found ways, and that is something I really like. Give individuals the chance to think about new ways, because there is no other opportunity, and then they do, and they just find ways and good ways. And we are really happy to, especially with this Icast project, which is a very huge project for us in DFS, the biggest we ever had, and we will continue on that, and we will make it.
Yeah, thanks. It's interesting to hear. I mean, now that things of the operating environment has changed, do you think that it's time? You know, that some of these large programs, you know, have to reconsider their focus really, as you know, to adapt to the new levels of flight activity. And what do you think about that, Stephen? Is that something that's going on in the US at the moment?
Oh, I do believe we think that the traffic will come back, and that we will have to support almost the same volume of traffic once it gets back, which is a couple of years. It does give us a little bit of a breather on some of our deployments for lots of reasons. I will say that the development phase has gone forward remotely, and actually, in some ways, it's gotten better because we actually can involve more controllers earlier. You always have to have controllers involved with everything you do. Mm-hmm. As we can get them in earlier, more of them can see what you're working on. We don't have to bring cadres in at every phase of the development. Now, eventually, we will want to have hands-on before we go to the field, but it does allow for more participation. But yeah, I think it will change some of our larger projects, but I don't think that's so much because of the COVID. That's really more about the fact that the technology is changing around us, and we are not funded through user fees. Mm-hmm. So we have not had the same funding issues, and we have a very robust urban air mobility crowd and a small UAS crowd. So we've been really working hard with them also remotely, and they're bringing a whole lot of new technologies to the table that we think can then roll over into regular ATC, which is why we do think we'll see new architectures and new capabilities. But I think that's more driven by the fact that the commercialization of these technologies into ATC is happening through our new entrants. And so we will see major changes and major innovations, but I don't think COVID's driving it as much as all the new players, people who've not traditionally been part of aviation are now part of aviation.
Okay. Do you think, I mean, which technologies do you think we're going to see change the way that we work the most within the next kind of, well, the rest of the decade, really? I mean, you mentioned some of the UTM stuff there, the avitals. I mean, what are the underlying sort of technology trends that you think?
Well, I think, you know, and it's a cliche now that anything that can be connected will be connected, but it's actually absolutely happening. And we've done a series of trials with even large aircraft, with Boeing and others, where you can use your tablet on the flight deck to do advanced computations in ATC. The traffic flow people can send you new information, and you can make decisions on flights in flight, and that you couldn't make with an FMS and a CPDLC message. Now, when you get to command and control, it will still be command and control, but there's so much more you can do with the aircraft via internet and other schemes. I'm always struck that about the pipes to the aircraft, about 3% of the data, 4% of the data is ATC. The rest of it are people managing that aircraft real time everywhere. We just have to embrace that and figure out how ATC can leverage that same use of technologies. And we don't have to always be voice and text-based.
Okay, sure. Wolfgang, I mean, what technologies do you think are going to be crucial as we kind of rebound back from COVID? I mean, is there anything that DFS is looking at that they weren't before, perhaps?
Well, something important is, of course, what has been mentioned by Stephen. For example, the data sharing or the data centers we are thinking about. I think that is a big chance now to put that into cloud-based, for example, because we have so many data now from the airlines, from the single aircraft, from our systems, from the Eurocontrol system. And if we put that all together, then you have a huge amount of data which can help you with, for example, artificial intelligence to get it used and to then get, and that is something I really think in Europe is something we should work on. We have the Single European Sky, which of course is something very important, but we will more work to a digital European Sky. I think that is the key, because we will not, like the FAA can do in the United States, to have 24 ACCs, all the same system, all the same command center steering them. And this is something in Europe which will most probably not happen, not in my lifetime and not thereafter. So we have to find other ways, and that can be the digital European Sky, to say, okay, we need some links between, of course, we need the interfaces which are standardized, but then you can use, for example, when we have this Icast system, which is then a very forward system, we can try to do things other than before, or better than before. And others can share this or can learn from this. Others already have things like that, like the UK, for example. And then we can continue on that base. That will always be a big difference between the FAA and the European ANSP system. As my grandpa said to me, if you see that you cannot change something, then don't try it. Let's try something else. And that is something we really like to do. So digital European Sky is maybe the answer.
Great. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Stephen, were you going to?
Yeah. So what you mentioned is both a plus and a curse, because we do have so much airspace and so many airports, everything else. We do go to single systems. They tend to be expensive when you get past Airport 40, Airport 50. I mean, a lot of our efforts are on the top 15 to 20 airports. And then we don't have the same availability to put the more advanced systems into our smaller airports. And we've got we have 178 terminal areas in the United States and hundreds of airports. We're looking also to how we can use this new digital world and this new scalability so we can provide, I like to call it democratizing ATC, where we can actually let smaller airports and smaller operators fully participate in something that's really focused on our big airports. And it's the digitalization, the ability to use other devices. We're doing an experiment with MITRE in the United States where we're looking at how can I provide digital clearances to general aviation pilots on their iPhones so that you know, they don't have to talk back, they don't have to do all that communications with the tower. And how can they request releases from these small airports? Is how can I use that digital world to provide, and mobile devices that are available to everyone to really provide full participation that right now is really kind of the purview of the big airlines and the big airports.
So that kind of modernization, Stephen, that you're describing there, I mean, you're not really, you're using tools and equipment that are already quite well established in other areas. Is that a kind of is that a policy almost there that you do?
It's an acceptance.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, look at the small UASs. They're nothing more than the remote control plane of 20 years ago, but they were hard to fly. Now you can sit there and you're flying with your iPhone or your iPad. I mean, that's the kind of thing you're seeing. When I started NextGen, when I was working on starting NextGen, we only thought of the datacom as our only link to the aircraft inside voice. My pilots were still dragging around giant Jeppesen charts in bags. 2010, suddenly we have iPads. Now the iPad's going to talk to the new 777X. Things have changed in the last 10 years, and ATC just needs to learn to embrace this change. Many of the technologies we're using are 50, 60 years old, and we don't need to replace them, but we need to supplement them with opportunities.
Sure. Wolfgang, I mean, 50, 60-year-old technologies, I mean, is that something you'd agree with, that DFS is using that technology that old? I mean, what would you say to that? Is that the case?
Well, of course, I would not bet my hand if we have something which is 50 years old. Could be. And well, if we are in a safety environment, and this environment, if something is working, it's very conservative. If it's working safely, then why should I change? That is the change management thing behind all this new system, and we will have that with this Icast as well. Because controllers nowadays, they have a system which is working. Why should they change? Yeah, I think they will change if there is enough curiosity to say, hey, the new thing is interesting. And of course the quality must be as good, but we still have in our ACCs or in our towers, we still have some very old things. It's not only the things you see right away; it's sometimes as well behind the scene. And we have, for example, we are going towards virtual tower or remote tower control. One of our airports we are controlling is now. Not anymore in Saarbrücken. It's not anymore controlled in Saarbrücken. It's controlled from Leipzig, which is 600 kilometers away from that. And the controller sitting there just watching the cameras. And so that is already a step towards a new kind of work. And this virtual work for towers, for example, something we are dealing with here in Munich as well. Not tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but maybe in 5 years or in 6 years of time, we can find technical solutions to go that way. And on the other side, well, a pencil still works. And so I use a pencil, for example, here to note down if I want to remember something. Something will not change, but we do not, for example, we do not have telephones with this. I don't know the English.
Wow.
Well, that is something we don't have anymore. No.
Sure. I understand your point. And in fact, it's a technical issue, I've been told, which is prevented Cristiano from coming back in. So technology can be amazing, but it can also be pretty annoying when it goes wrong, right?
Well, that's one of the things. That's one of the things that you have to be careful of. I probably wouldn't want to put everything into the cloud. I would still want to be able to do my safety function. So, how do you have a hybrid system where you have your local systems where you need them and your remote systems? 50-year-old technology. We still have ILSs. We still put out ILSs. That's because GPS is still vulnerable, right? We have a program called Next Gen DME where we're adding more DMEs so you can have what they call area navigation flight throughout the United States. And DMEs were invented in '47, but they work really well. They've been modernized because aircraft can ping more than once and get much more precision, but we do that because GPS is still vulnerable. But there will be other opportunities for other navigation systems that'll come along, and we just have to be able to embrace them as they come. Not everything has to be on VHF voice or data. We have to figure out what we can use other means to do, because with more data, we can do better development of information, and we can provide more support to people. I don't want to replace anybody. I just want to support them so that they don't have to have the same cognitive load of integrating data, as we like to say, into something that they can use. Singapore, they're building computer assistants, just like we have pilot assistants. They're building computer assistants on machine learning using more information. So there are opportunities around the world to support the workforce in their jobs with the new technologies.
Okay, great. It's actually the same technical hitch, I've been told, which means we've not received any questions from the audience also. Which is kind of annoying. Which is more. Are
you sure that somebody's listening?
Yeah, I can see them all. We topped out at about 130 people. I can see a long list of people, but can't hear from them, which is really frustrating. There's 120 people there already, so I can only apologise for that. That's something down to the webinar platform that we're using. So I think we'll just run through. Sorry, Stephen.
Well, I was going to say that this kind of, and we talked about this before, but I wanted to get back to the fact that we can do many things remotely, and it works really well. I've been around long enough so that I can work fairly well remotely, but especially for our younger engineers, our younger people, they don't have that same opportunity for that sort of, I'm not going to call it on-the-job training, but on-the-job interactions, which really helps them grow and learn. And so we're struggling on how to do those coffee break conversations over this technology, because it does make everything sort of transactional as opposed to sort of ad hoc and a lot of the learning for young engineers. And so I really worry about that part of this. Is that we need some sort of, even there we need some hybrid. How do we get our young engineers engaged with our older engineers so that they can learn and they can grow, other than in just the subject matter that they're currently involved in?
Yeah, I get what you mean completely. Yeah, it's I mean, Wolfgang, we'll just run through another couple of questions and then probably call it a day on this. Thanks for everyone for bearing with us. I mean, we were talking a little bit about the bounce back and COVID coming back. I mean, what stage are you planning for an uptake, or do those plans constantly evolve at the moment and change? I mean, it's so uncertain still at the moment, the situation. I mean, how do you even begin to cope with that internally at a place like Munich?
Well, I think here you come to a point which is about not so much technology. It's about leadership, and it's about dealing with changes at all. If you look as Stephen just had mentioned, the iPhone, some 12 years ago, it was invented the first time, and it brought a tremendous change to everything, how we live, how we communicate, for example. And here it's just normal for people to buy a new one, to accept that there's a new add-on and all these things. And in our world, we have to get the people to the same point, let's say, to get them to. I think it's important to have on the y-axis you have the curiosity, and the x-axis you have the quality of a system. And the higher both are, the better the acceptance of a system will be. You need the people. You need to have systems or functionality which makes people curious about, which makes them, oh, that's nice. I want to have that. And on the other side, it must work, of course. It's like here with Cristiano, it's not working, so this system maybe would not fit for ATC purposes. But if you have a high quality and if you have a high curiosity and bring that together, then you will have some people who are just willing. They have a great willingness to accept new systems, new functionality. And I think one thing we learned out of this iPhone story, let's say, so the last 12 years, it wasn't always the big step. And in Munich, for example, we had the last ATS system implementation was 2002, and now we have 2022, the next one. So 20 years in between is far too long. Of course, there were some steps in, but if you stick to the pure system, it's such a huge step now. And it's much better to have this gradual, from time to time, some slight innovations, some small things which are just a little bit better, and then you will get the result out of that. And so you have a permanent change rather than this one big step, because you have to take all the people with you. And when I was in Karlsruhe in 2010, we implemented their Icast system, or the preceding system of Icast. And it was one interesting story I had there with a controller. He came to my office about, let's say, 3 months before the cutover, and he was coming in asking if I had time for him. And then I said, well, yeah, of course. And he closed the door and he starts crying. And I said, well, interesting. A male controller, you're not used to that as a operations manager. And then after a while, he was just saying, well, he was a bit older than I was. And he said, I cannot work with the system. It's not. It's completely. He was so afraid of this new system. And well, then I said, okay, you have the training. You will have a retraining if necessary. You will have the cutover with lower levels of traffic. You will get used to that. And of course, after a while, he said, yeah, okay. And then, interesting enough, normally people just complain and then they never come back. In this case, it was different. About a quarter of a year after the cutover, he came back to my office, and I said, oh God, what will happen now? And he sat down, he closed the door, and I said, well, maybe I need some tissues for him. But this time it was completely different. He was sitting there, he was laughing, he was so happy about the new system. He told me with tears in the eyes how great the system works and how much it supports him. And of course, he didn't understand every little thing it's doing, but it's working. And for him, it was just great. And I was so, this story, I tell the story often because I really like it, because that shows the way people are, we should get to the people to get them used to new systems. And of course, you can be afraid of. Of course, there's some problems. But at the end, normally it works out well.
Great, thanks, Wolfgang. We've actually got questions back now, so I can see some from the audience already. So if perhaps you've submitted one already and you might want to resubmit. I've got one at the top here from Roger Mandeville on ADSB. How close are we to reduce separation using space-based ADSB over the oceans and poles? Does anyone feel qualified to answer that, Wolfgang or Stephen? I think there's some experiments going on already, isn't there? There's some research from NATS and about tracks. And Stephen, do you know anything about that, or we can pass?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're using in the North Atlantic, which right now, as I remember, that we were doing free routing because of the volume of traffic. That was a big change. So they're using in the North Atlantic. I think it improves the ability to track. I still believe that in some of the tracks they're using that you still have to have datacom for the fans. It's more technology based probing, and so you need both the intent and you need the positions, but it does improve. We've been doing some experimentation of where we could use it also for other locations. We probably could have used something like this in Alaska rather than putting transceivers out in the middle of God knows where with bears and other things. But we're still using it. We're also doing data experiments right now with the area on how we can use the space base to improve planning and other things. We have an experiment right now domestically where we use ADS-B to try to find turbulence, and we're seeing whether we can do the same thing in the ocean with the velocity vector off the ADS-B message. So there's things you can do with it besides just separation that we're looking at.
Great, thank you, Stephen. This perhaps is one for you, Wolfgang. It's from Regula Detling-Ott. She says, how can technical innovation contribute to reduce the cost of ATM, which she kindly puts in brackets, which in Europe is higher than in the US. So, have you got anything? Are you still looking at reducing costs at the moment? How are you doing that?
Yeah, of course, we are always in the tension field of trying to have the 4 targets in Europe we have to look for. And cost is one of them: safety, cost, capacity, and the environmental issues. And of course, you can cut costs with technology. If you, for example, have a technology which makes a controller able to work double the traffic, for example, then of course you would need half of the people. That would be a kind of a trade-off in terms of a finance thing. But there's as well smaller things. But of course, one of the cost drivers in ATC is of course the staff you have, which is quite normal. But with a gradual change or with some slow changes, of course, you can do things already. We work much more traffic than 20 years ago, and we still have about the same amount of controllers for that. So of course you see there is a ratio between that, and you can deal with that. For example, there's the things I said with the remote tower control. If you just put a tower remotely to somewhere else, that doesn't help so much because you have the same amount of people. But if you put remote towers to one remote tower center, and then you can, for example, during a night shift, have one controller being responsible for all the 4 or 5 or 3 towers, then of course you save some night shifts, and that saves at the end, of course, money. So here technology can help to bring things together and contribute here. But it's not. Of course, we have to look, and it's on the other side a question of investment. If we in Europe, from the EU regulators, are regulated so strictly to save costs now, especially at that time, we cannot invest money because we then just try to survive with the one we have. And so we have. It's as well from the politician side. We have to balance that because just saving costs in times like these, of course, we can do, but then there is no invention, and we lose the time we now have introducing new things in a time where maybe the traffic is not hit that hard than, for example, it was in 2018 or 19.
Okay, sure. I'd just like to move on to this question from Antonio Alonso Esteve. It's quite a pertinent question about technical failures. He wants to talk about, he'd like to ask about liability, who's liable in case of technical failures. For example, if a remote tower was to lose connection, just like Cristiano did just now, I mean, what would happen? I mean, who would be liable? What systems would kick in? Anybody want to hazard a guess at that, or you got it all worked out already?
Well, I think it's the same with an ACC. So we work remotely Our ACC here in Munich is responsible for the whole Bavarian area, nearly to and far to the north, let's say south of Berlin, and we are remotely responsible for that airports in that area, and we do ATC from far away. And liable or liability then, of course, is before you introduce such a system, of course, you make it safe as possible. But as well on a tower, if you sit there, your system can break down, and then if your voice comm is going down, then you're just doing nothing, and that doesn't matter if it's far away or it's on the spot. So, but that is a matter of having the contracts in that way, and with our remote tower, that is proven. So, for example, you can shut down the operations if necessary if the system doesn't work. But if my communication system here, for example, in the ACC of Munich isn't working, then we will shut down the operations as well. So that is something you have to have a backup or a backup to live with that. And I think that is the same with remote services.
Stephen, is this something you've looked at in next gen or not?
No, I mean, I think I absolutely agree. You understand that before you go in, and you have, what do you do if you have these outages? I worry less about the safety aspect of the liability because we define that ahead of time. I do worry that if you lose it too often, either your operator and your flag public get angry, or we also saw cases where 25 years ago our en route automation system would fail, and every time it would fail, because we were in between, our controllers would get more conservative, and we'd actually lose efficiency, we'd lose capacity, because our controllers would add more miles, more buffers, because they were reluctant to run the traffic with the same techniques. And so I think it's as much a capacity loss as anything else. And I think now you have to ask Cristiano about 6 questions to get him caught up.
We need to stay longer, guys, this afternoon.
He can have all of the last questions. Let's see.
Oh, yes.
I would welcome. I would love.
There's a question here. Why not? Hey, Cristiano, why not? There's a question here from Robert Hunger. Perhaps you'd like to start. We're starting at the deep end. He's asking if technical innovation can enable it. How much increase in capacity could you make? Could you facilitate? I mean, that's a bit of a general question, I guess. I mean, how much capacity? I mean, you fill the skies with aircraft, I guess. What's the limit?
Yeah, we can definitely go above the current limits, because I'm sure you have tackled that along the conversation. But with the introduction of new measures, which are dealing with the translation into ATC of practices that we have into the IT domain, I'm pretty sure we will be able to increase capacity. The introduction of machine learning and artificial intelligence, for instance, I'm pretty sure you went through that. Are going to strongly support the ATC systems and tools, especially the ATC tools, in increasing capacity, even though, and I'm pretty sure you went through it, I'm not sure that an increased capacity is the topic of this time. We need definitely to go through the way we should rethink our business models, and we should take good care of handling resilience in a way we can comply not only with the demand and the increased capacity, but especially with the needs of the customers, the needs of the airlines, the needs of the airports operators, in order to make sure we are able to have a new start and a new beginning, I would say, with different paradigm shifts. Maybe you went through the performance topic. Now we have other performance areas to deal with. Resilience, flexibility, scalability of service and systems. This is something we need to deal with, and we need to strongly go through, and we are doing that in Europe with the CESAR chain, and we are doing that in ENAV through specific activities we are running into our national test facility in Rome, and we are doing that collectively with our ANSPs, with our colleagues from the FS, and I'm pretty sure that even the CESAR joint undertaking will be in continuous contact with the next gen, because this is the priority we need now to deal with.
I'd just like to ask a follow-on question from what you were just saying, Cristiano, quickly. We were talking earlier about whether or not technology projects need to be reassessed because of COVID. Is that something that you're doing in your department, in innovation and planning? How has it affected how you're planning, particularly your technology improvement products?
The use of technology needs to be reassessed, and also the technologies that are available needs to be assessed, because we have new technologies upcoming which are offering very good opportunities in order to, rethink the way we provided services so far. I'm referring to the normal CNS chain, in particular to the COM part. There are new communication standards that are coming up and technologies that are going to replace the way we were used to provide data link services throughout Europe. And as far as navigation is concerned, there are brand new navigation means which are being experimented that in a few years will be a reality, and will be a paradigm shift, and will allow the services to be much cheaper and much more, let me say, close to the needs of the customers. As far as the new service model are concerned, we are not only dealing with the way technology will evolve, but how technology will be used. There will be new service models, and we know in Europe there is a very open discussion on that. It's part of a proposal for a regulatory framework, and I know the Commission has kicked off a dedicated study on the way they call the air data service provider. We know that currently the model in Europe is having ANSPs which take care of the whole chain of service provision. We generate our own data with whom we provide the services. In the next future, it is likely that we will have to tackle and to adequately assess new models for handling this kind of services, and maybe we will have what we call in Europe the common services, pan-European services that will be used by a number of stakeholders, and this is the area where we need all to engage very proactively, because this is the future and we need to all work collectively on that. ANSPs, airspace users, airport operators, and all the concerned stakeholders.
Thanks, Cristiano. Are you okay to keep speaking? I'll address this next question to you. We've been talking about remote working quite a bit as well, about how the way people working from home. We were doing that before the meeting as well, actually. There's a question here from Cecilia Cesavo, who wants to ask about how you've supported staff in setting up a proper work environment from home. Things like big screens, good connections, access to software and hardware. I mean, is that moving forward? Is that the way? Are you going to be actively helping staff to work from home, or would you want everyone back in at ENAV? Or, I mean, what's the policy going to be?
Yeah, this is maybe one of the takeaways from this crisis. After the pandemic, of course, also for ENAV, the personnel will work on a mixed mode environment. So part from home and part from the office. It depends, of course, on which kind of job you're handling. If you need to be on-site visits, then you need to go on-site. But of course, we will manage to take profit and to make best use of the lesson learned that we get from the crisis. And when I mention lesson learned, we also identified a new way of working, new way of interacting among the personnel, which is a good thing anyway. So, and of course, the technology has been highly supportive and has been able also to identify a more efficient way of doing things. So, if I can mention one of the good takeaways, of course, from the situation is a new way of working, which is proving somehow beneficial in some of the cases.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll go a little bit over time here. We'll answer the remaining questions that we've got. A few of the remaining questions that we've got. There's one here from Frederick Weiland, whose question really is about moving forward, how sustainability and the environmental impact is going to change the way that aviation works. He wants to know. I mean, for example, in France recently, they've requested that travellers use energy-efficient trains instead of flights for, there's legislation going through. Yeah, he's nodding his head. We've heard about this. So, I mean, with initiatives like that, I mean, what do you think will be the future effect on air travel? We talk about COVID, but do you think there's a long-term life in aviation? I mean, what's going to change? What's ATC doing to support environmental initiatives? Cristiano, perhaps you'd like to take it with.
Yeah, of course. And I believe that we can only gain again from the period we are living. The introduction of specific tools, I'm referring again to machine learning and artificial intelligence, can definitely improve the way we use ATC tool today. And of course, better performances can be achieved, which means having a better flight profile for the aircraft operators. And this is, of course, is going to reduce the footprint that we are going to experience. And I know that within the CESAR deployment framework, a number of interventions are being planned. And in these interventions, there is specific attention, specific focus on the environmental sustainability of all the investments that throughout Europe are being performed. So I'm pretty positive in of an improvement in the next few years that will be even accelerated by the new ways we will be handling our business upon.
Stephen, could you give us a perspective from the US on that? I mean, is it something that you guys in NextGen think about?
Oh, we think about, yeah, because we know that a lot of the inefficiencies are really about safety and not fully understanding the future conditions because of the fact we're not taking full advantage of the information. And I think Wolfgang mentioned that before, is that we live in an information-rich environment. With that, we can, we always say we're into trajectory-based operations now. I know your intent, but with all this additional information, I can actually predict the performance of the system. I can start to remove some of the buffers and be more efficient with every flight. And that's what we really want to do. Right now, we hedge against uncertainty, and we use probably lower numbers than we have to for runways. We perhaps move aircraft further than we have to because we don't understand what's going on. But fully harnessing information, we should be able to remove some of these buffers, be more precise. The airlines should be more precise. We should be able to build up fuel on the margins.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Wolfgang, I'd just like to address this question from Christian de Silveira to you. It's really about, the traffic flow has decreased because of COVID. And we've talked about maybe the negative aspects of that. But has it given an opportunity for you to review things and look at improving things such as airspace management and ATC within DFS? If you could you talk around that, Wolfgang, and then perhaps Cristiano, if you would like to comment?
Yeah, it's as well maybe as a point for this environmental thing. As I mentioned before, with the COVID, we had the chance to focus more on operational descent or climb profiles, which is a very important one, which is of course not possible if you have too much traffic. And I talked about this before. So that is something which is very important. One thing to the environmental, maybe it's not only about all the time the big political decisions towards that. Sometimes it's only a change of mind. And we for example, in Munich, we try to be a green ACC, which is more than just having optimum climb profiles and descent profiles, but as well, for example, to how can a building like the one we are in, the whole environment around us, how can we save that more? And what I really recognize is that people, especially younger people, they're much more caring about environmental issues at all. They want to have electric cars. They want to have bees with some possibilities to keep them. And all this change in mind, which is now happening, is something we should take. And then, of course, what I said before, in this the digital European sky, you can then with the whole bunch connect that together and find something out of that. And maybe with interoperability, but as well interconnectivity, like the fast trains you mentioned before. Maybe there's no need anymore to use an aircraft to fly from Nuremberg to Munich just to get your connecting flight, but you can maybe use a connecting train, which could be better, or which we didn't tackle that much. Maybe you have this new kind of taxis, these flight taxis, maybe autonomous flying around this unmanned or manned, but not with a pilot, vehicles flying around people from one airport to another. That is something I really think, or I believe that will come. But it's important to have first the digitalization and all the data on the table.
Yeah, right.
Cristiano?
Yeah. And I agree with Wolfgang. Digitalization, of course, is of the utmost importance. But of course, we need to understand exactly what's behind the word, what's behind digitalization. Digitalization, of course, it's a shift, it's a change in the operating model that we all are handling, and we know that there will be a change in the way we are handling operation and in the way we are providing services. And in this regard, within ENAV, we are having a number of trials. We have a huge deployment activity which takes care of a brand new ATM system and ATC tools like a brand new arrival manager, for instance, that of course is definitely to impact these performances. But on top of that, as I mentioned, we are going to have a paramount shift in the way services will be delivered. We have a program which, of course, we use also within the CSR framework, which is for the air data service provision. Is the first SWIM services registered within the SWIM registry, and it is called Co-Flight Cloud Services, and it is perfectly framed within the air traffic service, air traffic data service provision. This is something we share with other NSPs, with our French DSNA colleagues, and with the Swiss Sky Guide. And this is only one of the example of the paramount shift that we will experience in operations on the basis of new technologies, new systems and tools, but also on the basis of new service model that we will have to deal with. And in this regard, we all need to get quickly engaged to make sure that we run all the processes in order to put this concept, this brand new concept, into operation.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'd just like to wrap up there, please, if that's possible. I mean, I'll ask you, everyone, to sum up. But from my perspective, I mean, I think I'll take away that I've learned that you know, COVID has shaped what's happening at the moment. But perhaps moving forward, there are other technical forces that are happening and technical trends that, in the longer term, are really going to affect the way that ATMs run. Cristiano, is there anything that you'd like to finish up saying? I know we lost you for most of the time. I apologize.
Yeah. And I'm sorry for that. I will comply with the managers of the IT part, but nonetheless, I'm happy I was there even for a while. I would have had a better exchange and a longer exchange with Wolfgang and with Stephen, from whom I would have been interested to share a number of items along the questions that I'm sure you have been able to discuss and put forward. So I'm happy I was there. Of course, I hope it was a more long session to, of course, share with you what I'm sure you shared in my absence, but I was happy to participate even for 15 minutes.
Wonderful. Wolfgang, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, well, one thing which is very important to me is technology is nothing without leadership and people. So what we should not forget at any stage is that behind all that there are people, and you can achieve quite a lot with good people, and technology is something you have to use for that, but it's not replacing us people or human beings. And I think that is something important. Wish us all the best for our Icast implementation guys. That would help us, because in 16 months from now, we will have a big step. And of course, this will be a big technology change, which of course will need some good human beings with my good team there. And so, but yeah, that would help me the most.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Wolfgang. And Stephen, if you got anything you have to say?
Yeah, I wanted to leverage on something Wolfgang said earlier, which is that you know, his ATC system's been in place for 20 years. With or without COVID, we're really at a point now where we really have to decide what automation system we want 10 years from now, and because it's going to take us that long, you can only switch automation cost effectively when your old automation gets obsolete. So it's important for us to make some decisions now and to try to pick things that are more agile, so that obsolescence doesn't have to wait 10, 20 years. You can actually gracefully do it every 4, 5, 6 years, which is what you really want to be. You want to be a lot more agile. So that's all.
Interesting thoughts. Okay, well, thank you guys for your time, and thank you if you've tuned in and watched and bared with us throughout the hour now. There will be a link to the recording sent to everybody that registered afterwards, so Cristiano can see what you missed out on if he wants to, or perhaps forget it ever. perhaps forget that it ever happened. I'm not too sure, whichever you want to do. Yeah, so yeah, thank you everybody again, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.